In the previous session, we covered the basics of Newton's first law of motion. It said this: continues to stay at rest or continues to stay in motion at constant velocity unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Can you think of real-life examples in which this law is demonstrated? The continues to stay at rest part is pretty easy to think of. Let's say you have a bottle of water kept on a table. There is the force of gravity pulling it down, and there is a normal force pushing it up. As these forces balance each other out, the net force is zero. Now, unless there is some unbalanced force like a push or wind acting on this bottle, it will continue to remain at rest. Okay, another example. Let's say you're in the passenger seat of a stationary car holding a cup of coffee filled pretty much to the rim. Just for now, let's look at three objects in this case. First is you, second is the cup of coffee, and third is the coffee inside the cup. With respect to these three parameters, what do you think will happen when the driver accelerates the car from rest? You will be pushed slightly behind because your body wants to continue being at rest. But because you have the force of the backrest pushing you forward, you will not completely bend backwards. The cup also wants to stay at rest, but as you're holding it, it isn't thrown behind. Now what about the coffee? You will notice that it will spill on your lap. The coffee too wants to stay at rest, and though the cup has a force in the forward direction, coffee being liquid will spill. Now what about the second part of the definition? Continues to stay in motion. Can you think of an example? Let's continue with the same situation. Say the car is now moving at a constant speed of 10 meters per second and the driver suddenly applies brakes. What will happen? The force of the road on the locked wheels provides the unbalanced force to change the car's state of motion and brings it to a halt. What about you? What will happen to your state of motion? It depends. Depends on whether you're wearing a seatbelt or not. If not, there is no unbalanced force to change your state of motion and you'll be thrown forward along with the cup and the coffee. All objects will continue to be in a state of motion unless acted upon by an external force. If you're wearing a seatbelt like a good citizen, you will not be thrown forward because the force of the seatbelt is pulling you back and brings you to a state of rest. But the coffee will still spill forward as it wants to remain in a state of motion. So that's Newton's first law for you. If you can think of more examples, please tell us in the comments section below. In the next section, we will understand what inertia and mass mean.